Hi, everybody. Welcome to Creating a Comprehensive CV. My name is Juli McDonald, and I am the Assistant Director of the Career Development Center on our Center City campus. And today I wanted to walk us through some of the more advanced techniques that a lot of our alumni need as they move forward in their careers to help them to start thinking about what is a CV, why might I need this document, how is it different from a resume, and what can I do to update these documents. So we'll spend the next 10 to 15 minutes together going over some tips and tricks, and then I'll let you know how you can contact our office at the end of the presentation. So sit back and enjoy. So on the screen right now, we have the number 8. It's not the infinity symbol turned on its side. And so the reason I always like to bring this up, and something to keep in mind as you are crafting your resumes, CVs, job hunting documents in general, is that 8 is the number of seconds that most recruiters are looking at our resumes and our CVs, right? So one of the things to keep in mind as you're doing these documents is to make them really easy to read and really quick for recruiters to use those 8 seconds to really get to know you. And so you can maximize that time by just some quick formatting tricks. So we'll go through why formatting is important, but just keep that number 8 in mind. What we're looking for is really to make the document easy to read. It should be organized, and also we should make sure that we have our most important information towards the top of the page. And that information is going to change, right, depending on what we're applying to. So we also want to customize all this stuff towards whatever job we're applying to. For some jobs, that top of the page might include different skill sets and experiences than other jobs, even within the same field, right? Because every job's looking for different skill sets. So just keep that in mind. And now let's move into the nitty-gritty. What is the difference between a resume and a CV? For most of you in industry jobs, your resume is a document that you're really going to want to be working with. So this is anyone in a clinical position, anyone who's applying to anything, again, in industry. A CV comes into play when you're looking at something in academia. So if you're applying to a teaching position, whether that's a full-time position or an adjunct position, as many of us do as we move on into our careers. So if you want to teach the college level, that's when we're going to start thinking about a CV, and that's what we want to use for those types of positions. The other reason you might need a CV is for a research-based position. So anything in a lab, the folks that you'll be applying to and the hiring managers of those jobs will be used to seeing CVs. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes in industry, people will use resume and CV interchangeably, but really just remember industry, clinical, resume, research, teaching, CV. And so then what's the difference between these two documents? The resume is only 1 to 2 pages. As we move up in our careers, 2 pages is totally acceptable. Most of us have probably had a couple jobs or maybe even been in one job, but for a large length of time. So we've had a lot of projects and notable achievements that we need to talk about in order for the employer to get to know us and want to interview us, right? So that's really 1 to 2 pages is what we're aiming for. For a CV, sky's the limit. CVs, we want to have everything we've ever done, even going back into our education sometimes, depending on if you had some notable achievements from when you were in graduate school, or especially if you've done a PhD, a lot of the stuff from those points in your life will still be fair game for the CV, even if you've been out for many years. So that can be 4, 5, 6, 7. I've seen one that's 70 pages. The CV should also include and have specific focus on your publications, presentations, research, and teaching. So those are the components that most academics are looking for when they're hiring and what you'll want to really showcase. So publication should be in APA format, and also all the presentations that you've done at different conferences throughout your career. Now your resume really should focus more on industry and work experience. So you might have some of that stuff on there, but it's not going to be a primary focus. It might be further down on the page or on the second page, and you don't have to worry as much about that APA formatting. You just want to make sure that the employer has the information that they need to be like, oh great, this candidate has presented at 3 conferences last year. That's pretty cool, right? So the resume should be tailored to each job and industry. Again, we touched upon this for a couple seconds in the last slide, that we want to really recategorize our experiences by relevance and not just leave everything as professional experience, right? Because that takes too long to sift through, and I've had the recruiter waste their 8 seconds just trying to figure out what they need to know about me. Whereas if I do the work for them and recategorize in a way that puts our most relevant experiences first, then that recruiter takes that 8 seconds to be like, okay, cool, this person is someone I want to talk to further. Your CV doesn't change. It's just pretty standard, and you just kind of keep adding to it and keep growing it as you go through your career. You don't drop things off. With your resume, you might drop off least relevant experiences as you move into different points of your career. So we touched on most of this stuff. One other thing to note, if you have extensive experience and you're staying in the industry clinical side of things, make sure you keep a master copy somewhere where you do kind of just add everything you've ever done, similar to a CV. It doesn't have to be as organized as a CV because you're not going to submit this anywhere. It's just for you, but you never know when you might apply to something and they're looking for a skill set that maybe you had a couple years ago or a couple jobs ago. You naturally drop that off your resume at this point. It could just be helpful to have all that information somewhere. This way you don't have to try to remember. You can just move it back onto the resume. Rule of thumb is about 10 years. So if you have experiences from over 10 years ago, sometimes I meet with alumni who have experiences from the 1980s still on their resume, it's probably not going to be relevant anymore. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to put every experience you've ever had on your resume. What we're really looking for is lean and mean and gets the relevant information to the employer. So here's a great example of just a basic format. One of the things I do want to point out here to folks, a couple different pieces. One is the summary. We're going to talk more about that in the next couple slides, but summary for mid-career and late career professionals is really, really important because that's going to pull together all the great themes from the years of work that you've had and make it, again, just easier for that recruiter to be able to digest why you're a great fit for the job that you're applying to. The other piece I want to point out is if you look, there's a healthcare section, an additional experience, and an activities section. And that's even, having 3 different sections of experience, I would say is a pretty small amount. A lot of times when I work with folks on really updating their documents, we go even deeper. We might have 5, 6, 7 different categories of experience. One of the things we want to stay away from is just having one large professional experience section and just throwing everything in there and hoping the recruiter will find what they need. That's what I call the lazy approach to creating a resume, and it's not going to really be beneficial when you're applying to jobs that you might not know somebody at, and they really have to get to know you just purely from this document. So sky's the limit with those experience sections. Sometimes you can be really creative with them. I'll have students or alumni who are trying to move into nurse practitioner, for example, and they might just have nursing experience. And I will encourage them to pull it out even further and have nurse practitioner experience, or even further than that, family nurse practitioner experience. Be specific and pull out what's relevant, and that's what really enhances your job hunt. So here's some basic formatting guidelines, just in case you do want to update your resume or CV. Sometimes I see folks that this is kind of the old school way of doing it, where they'll have a very large left margin and they'll have all their dates along the left-hand side and everything else, all the experience and the bullets and information is kind of crunched to the right. I would really suggest reformatting your resume if you have it like that into something much more modern. That's a very old school way of doing it, and you're going to tip your hand immediately that you're not as savvy in the resume world as you could be. So we can help you with that reformatting, but I definitely say take a look at some of our samples because they're a little bit more snazzy and up to date. So other just basic formatting guidelines, again, 2 pages is totally fine. You don't have to crunch yourself to 1 page, especially if you've had 10, 15 years experience. Make sure you use a nice, clean, common font. Times New Roman is great. Arial's great. Reverse chronological order, so most recent to least recent within each section. Don't use too many parentheses or bullets within bullets within bullets. Then we're at inception levels, and again, we're aiming for clarity. This way we can maximize those 8 seconds, and we're not confusing our readers or having them try to parse out what we're trying to tell them. Just tell them what they need to know. Lastly, submit as a PDF, just in case you are working on a Mac or a PC and the reader is opening this on their phone or on a Mac or a different type of computer. You want to make sure you preserve all that formatting. So the PDF is the best way to do it. So we talked a little bit about the summary. Summary is not an objective. Some of you might have an objective on your resume. Objectives are 1970s old school, going even further back than the 80s. And they were really used when folks used to drop off their resumes at companies before there was even a job opening. And that's how recruiters knew, okay, we have a job opening. Let's see who would be interested in this kind of job based off of what they have in their objectives. We don't need to do that anymore. With the beautiful digital age, right? We apply online for things. I know you're interested in my job because you're applying to it. So instead, use that space at the top of your resume to write a great summary. And that should be exactly what it sounds like, a summary of your accomplishments across your career. We want it to be specific, we want it to be detail rich, and we don't want to write it in first person. So I would say 4, 5, 6 statements, highlight reel. What are the greatest accomplishments that you want them to know about you? What are your greatest skill sets that you want them to know about you? What is your education or training or certifications? It can be a combination of all those things to create a comprehensive narrative. If you have an about section on your LinkedIn, this is essentially the same deal, just on the top of your resume. And you will want to customize this. This is not static, depending on what position you are applying to. It's not necessary on a CV, but it is definitely necessary for the resume. And so we've highlighted here just a little job summary, and we've highlighted the areas that you might want to focus on. And so this can be a great exercise when you're trying to think, what do I put in the summary, or how do I update my summary, going through and highlighting the aspects of the job description that you have. Again, no I, me's, or my's, more talking about yourself, just like we do in the bullets, all third person. Education is one thing I want to point out, particularly for those of you who might have been out of school for a while. Your education can naturally fall to the bottom. It's not going to be as relevant anymore. What's going to be most relevant is that summary and then your experiences. So sometimes it is, if you've just done a graduate program, you'll leave it back up towards the top. But if it's been a couple of years, throw that education to the bottom. It's okay. We talked a little bit about the experience section, but here's just some more ideas as to different headers or organizational tools for you to organize that experience. Again, be specific. You can put leadership as a section. You can put research, publications, teaching. Lots of great information here if you want to pause real quick and read through this slide. So when we talk about our experiences, we also use bullets to do that. And here's a great example of how you can take situations from your job and make them into bullets. So this bullet that we're using as an example here is streamline communication with testing facilities to ensure lab work was returned promptly, increased efficiency by 20%. That is such a strong bullet for a number of reasons. One, it starts with an interesting verb. I see a lot of folks who use the same verb over and over again: provided, 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 taught, taught, taught. Be interesting in your language, be interesting in the verbs that you use. We have some great resources on our website where you can take a look at a list of different power or action verbs. You can Google power or action verbs, and you'll get so many different lists and ideas of how to say what you want to say in a more interesting and engaging way. Again, 8 seconds. Grab the reader with something like streamlined or communicated or collaborated. Those are really strong words. Also, we want numbers. Numbers are king. We live in an evidence-based, data-driven society now, so it's not enough to just say you streamlined the communication with the testing facilities. What did that do? What was the result? So you increased it by 20%. Amazing. So use this situation for the different projects that you want to highlight and all your bullets. So we talked a little bit about this stuff already, but one thing for the CV, just to note, professors and academics like grants. So if you have experience writing grants or securing funding, that should definitely be on your CV. It's not going to be as important in the resume setting, but for the CV, that's going to be a big one. People always ask me about a skills section. I think as we move later into our careers, a skills section can be really beneficial because it highlights just the equipment you've worked with. If you speak another language, what specific skill sets you have. I would keep this to hard skills. If the job description is looking for soft skills, like if you're a team player, you can put those within the bullets themselves and then use a specific situation as evidence for you being a team player, but it wouldn't necessarily waste the space in a skills section to list things like that. Instead, I would use this for lab or tech skills, more of those hard skills that you have. So lastly, kind of thinking about some more advanced techniques that we touched upon, a nice little summary for you. Summary of the summary. Summary is incredibly important. It can be extremely useful to highlight again what this reader needs to figure out from your resume in 8 seconds. So definitely take a look at the summary and consider using one. Education can drop down to the bottom of the page, especially as we move further in our careers. Breaking your experience into chunks by relevance, so just having different titles and moving your experiences around, not just leaving them in that big blanket reverse chronological professional experience section, is going to really help make your resume stand out and move you to that interview stage. You can get snazzy and specific with those names. So if you're an OT, for example, and you want to work with kids or you have some experience, you can make a whole section that's pediatric occupational therapy experience, acute care occupational therapy experience. You don't even have to just put all your OT experience in one section. One note about clinicals: as you move forward in your career, you might find that you can drop your clinical experiences off, or at least some of them. Don't be afraid to do that if you're like 3-4 careers out by this point. There's no need to still have your clinicals from back in the day when you were just observing, because you've done so much more than that now. Keep it keyword rich. So that means as we look at the job description, just like I showed you in that one sample with the highlights, make sure that you are taking their words and their language and mirroring it back to them. Our resumes all go through the applicant tracking system now, at least if you're applying to big hospital systems or just big organizations. So that's how you're going to get through that system, by having 80% of what they're looking for. So use those keywords in your bullets, in your summary, and in that skill section. Focus on accomplishments and not tasks. So don't just reiterate the responsibilities of the work you've done, but use numbers in those bullets to show what are the projects that you've done that have really made a difference where you are, with the accomplishments or achievements. That's what we're focusing on as we get it later in our careers. You don't have to keep every experience you've ever done. As we mentioned, it's okay to prune, take things off that are no longer as relevant. And for longer experiences, this is another big one I like to note. Sometimes I'll work with folks who have been in the same job for 20 years, right? But you've done so many things during those 20 years and you've increased your responsibility. You just maybe have the same job title. So what you can do is have the job title itself, where you're working, and then maybe a couple bullets about those day-to-day responsibilities. And underneath that, have a notable achievements section. And in that section, you outline all your projects. And that can just be really helpful, again, to try to parse out, how do I show someone that I've had 20 years of great work? So that was a quick overview of CV versus resumes at later points in your career. Take a look at our website. The link is right there for you. We have a resume writing guide, cover letter samples. We do lots of stuff with interviewing. There's some more webinars on there, so definitely take a look. And if you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out to us. We are available for you throughout your career. Even if you've graduated 20, 30 years ago, we're still here for you. So you can make an appointment with us on Handshake. It's the bottom link on this page, and that's the in touch with us. You can also shoot me an email at juli.mcdonald@jefferson.edu, or the main career development email right there. So thanks for taking some time to update your documents, and we hope to hear from you.